welcome Patrick, welcome Deborah. We're going to give it a few minutes just until we officially start at 9 o'clock, but thanks for joining us in the room. We're going to be talking about, is hypnosis a scam, which is, quite a controversial kind of question that I think a lot of people may come up. If you are a hypnotist, you may have heard this, and I guess variations on that question as well. Is it fake? Is it real? All those kind of stuff as well is largely linked to this idea of hypnosis. Is it a scam? So we're joined with Rowan today. Rowan, how are you and how's your week been?
I'm good, thanks, Adam. The week's been busy, touring about England just now, so I'm remote this week, so things are good.
Fantastic. I can hear that you're still coming through my phone at the moment rather than the mic, so I'm going to see if I can get this going through the Bluetooth, which I think should make all the difference. Okay. Yep, now I can hear you through my headphones. So welcome Martin, welcome Justin. We're going to be talking about hypnosis. Is it a scam? Is the topic for today's hypnosis rooms on Clubhouse. We're going to start in about a minute just because that's the scheduled time, really. Give it some thought. Is it a scam? Do you think it's a scam? Do you think people out there think it's a scam? If you have any questions for us, or if you've got any opinions yourself as to whether or not you think it's a scam or why you might think other people think it's a scam, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get you up on stage. I'd love to have as many people involved as possible. And one thing just to let everyone know, this is being recorded and being streamed live on YouTube now. So by coming up on stage, you are giving permission that we can record and stream you. Just bear that in mind, really. Welcome, Joanna. Welcome, Rena. Good to have you here. We're going to be talking hypnosis. Is it a scam? So, Rowan, why don't we start off with really thinking about the question. What do you think the word scam means? What does the word scam mean to you?
I think scam means that it's some form of con, it's some form of confidence trick in that respect, and it's not something that's real in the way that we as hypnotists claim it to be.
That's a fair. I think most people would agree with that definition of scam. It's deceitful, dishonest, kind of an element of exploitation or, shenanigans, really, taking money, but without creating the value. And why do you think there is this perception, more than maybe some other industries, of this element of fakery, skullduggery, or dishonesty, perhaps connected to hypnosis? Because some people really do feel, oh, it's all fake, it's all just a scam, and a lot of people within the industry perhaps know that it isn't, or they may know that some people they wouldn't necessarily recommend to other people because they're not necessarily creating the value. But why do you think there is this connotation, at least, even if it's not a widely held belief, but in some people there is a perception of hypnosis being slightly underhand?
I think there's a few contributing factors here. One of them is the regulation of the industry and training involved. Some people go through years of training, some people go through a weekend, and they can all call themselves a hypnotist. So I think from that perspective, there is an element of it being seen by the general public as not something that's maybe as well regulated as something like psychotherapy or these sort of types of healing modalities. And I think there's also the side of it where people don't have a clear understanding of what hypnosis is. And I think a lot of hypnotists, even if you ask them what is hypnosis, they won't be able to tell you in a clear and defined way what they think hypnosis actually is. So there's this sort of grey area in people's minds as to what exactly hypnosis is and whether they've experienced it before.
Mm.
I don't know if you've got anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's the big elephant in the room, isn't it? The lack of regulation and the lack of any kind of verifiable way of knowing how competent a therapist is. And I think some of the directories and registers and accreditation bodies have been created to address this issue, but really, how does it really address the issue of knowing that therapists are credible and well qualified? I'm not sure that it does. If anything, the fact that there are so many different bodies, so many different directories, I think virtually anyone could have letters after their name, have dubious qualifications, give the perception or illusion of competency, and not really be competent. So I think the fact that there are so many different bodies and directories and kind of certifications contributes, I think, maybe from the outside of feeling, how can we trust this industry? There isn't something like the I forget what it is, the British Medical Council or something like that, where a doctor can be struck off for incompetence. There isn't that kind of stuff. The worst that can happen for a hypnotherapist is that they're frowned upon by their colleagues, or they kind of get a reputation for being maybe a bit dodgy. But I think that really is one of the the genuine reasons why people, I think, maybe look at hypnosis like perhaps they look at other modalities that require perhaps just a weekend course or something like that. Where can it really be trusted? As always, we're talking today about hypnosis. Is it a scam? Love to get your input. If you're listening in the audience right now and you've got something to say, an opinion either way, perhaps a question, food for thought, please raise your hand and we'll get you up on stage. And great to get everyone's involvement. For anyone that is interested there, would be fantastic. It looks like I don't know if I can actually I can see Robert is raising his hand there, but I don't know if I can actually get Robert up on stage here. I don't know why that's not working.
Just disappeared for me.
Maybe he's lost connection. So, but if you have got something to say, interesting point. If you feel that you've experienced hypnosis and you felt it was a bit dodgy, a bit of a scam, tell us about that experience. Love to hear it. And what's your theory for those people that do think that hypnosis is maybe, not to be trusted or any of that kind of stuff? Why do you think that's the case? Justin, welcome up on the stage. What's your question or what's your point?
Hello, thank you, everyone. So forgive me, English isn't my first language. So if I sound a little bit silly, that's it. I'm Italian, and I work as a stage hypnotist. So when you said that the topic was hypnosis is a scam, I have experience of that every day, because when you do my type of hypnosis, which is different than therapy, and I think you made a very good points about the certifications and all that. Even in Italy, it's the same. There aren't any regulations for hypnotherapists, more or less. As a stage hypnotist, I always think that a lot of people that come to my show don't really think that hypnosis is real, because even getting hypnotized is a skill. Being a hypnotist is, of course, a skill. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes a lot of studying. But even going into a state of trance, I think it's a type of skill that not everybody have time to practice, time to experience. And so a lot of people go into a trance because you can see their body, you can see their, the body language. But after that, they wake up and they say, yeah, I don't think I was hypnotized, because there isn't exactly a way to be hypnotized. There isn't exactly a manual. Everybody experiences it in different ways. And at first they feel like it should be different, because movies, cartoons, and all of that give us a weird representation of what hypnosis is. And so I think that people that come into hypnosis says, okay, I watch it, I saw it in cartoons, I saw it in movies, I know how it's going to be, and then it's completely different. And they think, yeah, it wasn't hypnosis, it's a scam. And also being a stage hypnotist, people always think that hypnosis is a scam because they say that I pick my volunteers, that they are not really volunteers, but people that were paid to do with the shows and all that. So that is my thought on the matter. I thought it was at least understandable. Sorry again for my bad English.
No, your English came across very well, very articulate. Appreciate your point there. I completely agree with what you're saying. I think, that element of expectation management, that because of movies, because of the element of almost mystique around hypnosis, I use Scooby-Doo as the default, cartoon that kind of caricatures the hypnotist as being the Machiavellian manipulator, the controller. You are under their spell. And you're right, a lot of people have this kind of almost deflated disappointment of it didn't meet the level of expectation that they had, and that might be amnesia, or it might be certain elements of really deep otherworldly experience. And in a previous week we were discussing about convincers and how important convincers are, because I think what we agreed collectively, I think at the end of that session, is that convincers are a great way to not necessarily improve the hypnosis, but to give the recipient the feeling of them being hypnotized, which then actually can bind and reinforce some of the suggestions, because it feels somehow different than just them being relaxed. You're a stage hypnotist. Obviously, stooges are one thing where you pay people to kind of act out. To what extent, and I've never done stage hypnosis, I would imagine, though, that selecting those that are most suggestible to actually be the stars of your show is a vital ingredient in having a really entertaining show. And do you think, because you can pick and choose the audience members to actually be on the stage, that gives the illusion of it being more powerful than if you were to pick and just work with people at random? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that, of course, as you said, reading the room is a vital skill. I always say that in stage hypnosis, there's in stage hypnosis, 60% of the work is done by the hypnotist, 30% of the work is made by the hypnotist, and 10% of the work is made by your sense of theater and how you can read the room and get who's more suggestible. There are a lot of ways you usually try to pick up people. But I think that doesn't help a lot with the scam thing, because, again, if I pick people, everyone thinks that they're stooges, more or less. And also, I think that there are a lot of schools of street hypnotism. For example, the American one is more based on, let's just say, humiliation. I mean, clack like a chicken. Now we're going to be a pop star and all of that. So that kind of softened the blows, because, who would want to clack like a chicken? And so people starting to think that maybe it wasn't real, because it's not something fun. It's not something people would do. What I try to do in Italy, it's based more on the mystique, on the magic tricks, on, maybe doing catalepsies, making forget numbers. I mix a lot of street magic. So I usually focus not on the public, but on the person that I'm working with. And that helps, because I don't really care about what people saw. I care about the experience that my hypnotist is having. But I think that the concept of hiring people to believe in what you do is inherently in hypnosis as a stage thing. Because to a lot of people, hypnosis isn't real. And so everything that you can say whatever you want to them, you can show them books, you can show them reports, you can say it's scientific, everything. But their mind is set. It's not real, it's impossible, nobody would do that. And my input is always seen as something external. If I have control, people are usually thinking that I am manipulating the odds. I'm stacking the odds in my favor. So yes, it's hard because again, in magic, you can lie more. While hypnosis, I don't think you can lie to your hypnotist. But not everybody knows that. There's a lot of misconception, and I can really go on. I'm losing my words, sorry. But
it's really insightful, Justin. Because obviously, myself and Rowan are, mainly clinical hypnotherapists. Graham, that's normally joining us, who can't join us today. It's his 15th wedding anniversary, so we got gazumped, Rowan, by Graham's wife, just so you know. But he does come from a background of street and stage hypnosis, so has got that element of it's about showmanship, and there is a fine line, because if you have the kind of hypnotic phenomenon which isn't extreme, then it's not really entertaining. So it's about getting that kind of balance of amazing the audience by them seeing something that they wouldn't expect that person to be able to do. So really fascinating insight from you, Justin. It's great. We were saying before the show, great if we could have someone from a stage background, involved in today, because I think that contributes to a lot of the perceptions of fakery, because they can't identify with the people on stage. And I've actually done it myself, where I was a participant in stage hypnosis, and I was pretending, I was playing along, just to kind of see what was happening close up. But I certainly got a sense that the majority of people on that stage certainly weren't playing along. They were, experiencing hypnotic phenomenon, and they were doing things because they were suggested to do so. So really appreciate your thoughts there, Justin. What's your thoughts, Rowan, on stage hypnosis and how that contributes to the perceptions of, whether or not hypnosis is a scam?
I think, you guys have covered it quite well here. That, it does. And it goes back into the history of stage hypnosis as well, where some of the early stage hypnosis performers would actually pay those cohorts to come around and work with them in the crowd. So they had their good subjects that would come around, and some of those were natural somnambulists, and some of them were people that were just playing along. So I think there's always been this, if you don't experience it yourself, you're always going to question it, because it can sometimes seem quite extreme that someone can't bend their arm or they've lost their name. You're like, do I really believe that? And then as a clinical hypnotist, when you start working with these tests to check whether you're actually achieving these sort of states, you get the first client that goes bright red and hides their hand under the table or something like that because their hands are genuinely locked together. You get that understanding that, okay, there is these people that this really does have a powerful shift and effect to. And I think that's the point where because when you're going through training, you quite often, that other people are potentially just playing along. But when you see those really natural reactions from people, and it takes a certain level of sensory acuity to be able to notice that is a genuine reaction and not something that someone's just playing along with. So I think that takes a certain level of skill and time to develop within anyone. Some people have it naturally, and some people, it's obviously a more learned level of sensory acuity. But I think that the whole stage hypnosis thing, and also like media and some of the ideas about hypnosis that are perpetrated in the media, cause this questioning. But I think it's a natural questioning of the human mind. To be a sort of healthy skeptic is a good thing. So it's getting to that point where we can see some shifts and some changes. And I know Anthony Jacquin, who I think Deborah knows as well, he uses the swan in one of his stage hypnosis type shows. He does a seance. I can't remember the name of it. It's Annie Bestant or something like that. But he uses the swan as his selection process and gets everyone in the audience doing the swan. and then gets their swan to lead them on stage. And if you see an entire audience of people alongside you getting these idiomotor movements out of your arm, that's going to be a pretty good convincer. So I think that some stage hypnotists can sort of mitigate that perpetuation of that idea that it's maybe a scam or something that's not fully real and people are just playing along, if they can see a phenomenon like that happening within the whole audience, perhaps.
Mm. Yeah, and I think Hollywood as well, again, amplifies this feeling of unbelievability. And, you know, whether it's, I think it's Trance, the movie with Angelina Jolie and I forget the other cast members, but the heist element of people losing, you know, their entire memory and kind of, you know, stealing things without knowing. And what's the other movie that there's kind of a very specific post-hypnotic suggestion? I think it's Old Boy, the Korean movie, where effectively he's been subliminally programmed while in false imprisonment over years to then basically sleep with his own daughter. So when you see these kind of extreme, unbelievably, you know, kind of fanciful things, you know, for the average person that doesn't know a lot about hypnosis, they're going to look at that and say, oh, that's, you know, complete, you know, thing. And then generalize that experience against all hypnosis. Again, if you're listening right now and you feel, you know, that you've got an opinion about, is hypnosis a scam? Why isn't it as trusted as maybe other things? You know, we're in a world right now where people think everything's a scam. The medical profession's a scam, you know, the legal system's a scam. So anyone can have an opinion on anything of it being, you know, fake or real or useful or fraudulent. But what's your opinions? Or do you have any questions? You know, do you have any questions for, we've now got Justin as a stage hypnotist up here. We've got 2 clinical hypnotists up here. Do you have a question or maybe just a thought, you know, from an outsider's perspective as to whether or not hypnosis is a scam? Please raise your hand. We'll get you up on stage. I guess another topic of thought outside of Hollywood and stage hypnosis, creating perceptions about hypnosis and how real, how genuine, how authentic it is, probably is linked to a lack of competency in certain hypnotists. And I think any good hypnotist has definitely run into clients that are at their wits' end, and they will say things like, I've already seen 3 or 4 different therapists. I've spent a lot of money. Nothing happened. I just felt like I was relaxed. So to what extent are, you know, let's say less competent, or maybe just people starting out in their career, but with less competency, can lead to people having an experience of hypnosis that maybe isn't the best? And my feelings on that is that there is something different about hypnosis compared to other professions. For example, Rowan, if you went to a dentist and the dentist was awful, you know, didn't seem to know what he was doing, and made a complete mess of things, I'm pretty sure that your evaluation of that would be, that dentist is atrocious. I'm not going to that dentist again. And I think that differs from the experience that a lot of people have with hypnosis. And they'll say things like, I've tried hypnosis, it doesn't work. And there is more of an eagerness to generalize the whole of hypnosis based on one experience often. Whereas you don't really see that. People wouldn't hire an electrician and say, yeah, electricity doesn't work. You know, I've tried that, doesn't work. You know, but you do see that in hypnosis. Why do you think that tends to be the case quite often?
It's an interesting question. You know, it is this area where there's not really any sort of, you know, if you're going to a dentist, you can see there's a physical result. If you're going to the doctor, there's quite often a physical result, or they give you a pill or something like that, but there's some sort of physical worldly interaction going on, whereas hypnosis is effectively all in the mind, although it is affecting some of the body. You know, it's all psycho. So it's a lot harder to see the results instantaneously unless you get a good hypnotist that can effectively test their work in the moment and show you that something's actually changing, something's actually happening. So if you use phenomena or something like that, then you can get a clear indication that this is working. But the majority of hypnotists, I think, sort of shy away, especially clinical hypnotists, shy away from doing hypnotic phenomena in the work. So it's sort of, in that respect, quite difficult to separate hypnosis as an entire field from the hypnotist that's working with you at that moment in time, and whether they're even actually a hypnotist or just a relaxotherapist or something along those lines.
I think it's a really valid point, and I think in a bit we'll get to, how could we tell the difference if there was someone pretending to be a hypnotist compared to a real hypnotist? Like, how would we tell the difference from a scammer from someone genuine? But first, Deborah, welcome up on the stage. Do you have a question or a point you'd like to make?
Yeah, hi. I was just going to say that I think a lot of it is because as well is that hypnotherapy is really still quite unknown to a lot of people. So you still get that every time you say to somebody you're a hypnotherapist, they're like, what? How does that work? Whereas if you go to the doctor with an illness or anxiety or whatever, he's got to put you on maybe 4 or 5 different pills before something really works. And it's come back in 6 weeks, it takes this long, we'll see you then. And you don't turn around and say, doctor's a scammer because that didn't work right away or that didn't take effect right away. But if somebody goes for hypnotherapy and they don't notice an instant change, then it's that was a scam. That was rubbish. That didn't work for me. So I think the mentality, the thought process of it should change a little as well. But I was really interested in what you were saying. I think as well, what you were saying about people doing weekend courses and then they're hypnotherapists, and that might not help because I personally, have been training for years and I still think I've got a lot to learn. I'm still learning every single day. So, yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Deborah. And I think, that integrity, I think, is one of the key things that differentiates the scammers from those that are kind of for real, because I think, any true scammer is just going to know just enough to act the part and then be able to extract money from their customers. They're not going to be reading the books. They're not going to be doing CPD. They're not going to be taking additional courses. They're not going to be reflecting on, what they did right, why it didn't work. They're just going to go through the motions. And this is part of my issue with scripts, because I think if I wanted to be a scammer, you could do a weekend course. You could subscribe to a website with thousands of scripts. You could print them off and you could read them at your client and still call yourself a hypnotist. And sometimes in Facebook groups, I see people asking for recommendations. I've got this client. What's a good script for this? And that just makes me think, well, are these real hypnotists, or are these people that are, almost doing the equivalent of reading bedtime stories? That they're reading at their client. There's no calibration. There's no elicitation. There's no sensory acuity to figure out what's working, what isn't, and refining. So I think there are scammers out there that are there because they see it as easy money, and they have purely the goal to extract money under the guise of helping people. And you see this in every different industry. There's going to be some people that are charlatans that are trying to exploit, customers. I think the majority of hypnotherapists are very well-intentioned people. And in my own personal experience, I think there is almost, dare I say it, too much study. I think a lot of hypnotherapists constantly feel that they need to learn more and do more. And I think some of them need to put the books down and actually see more clients, work more clients, and get more competent through real experience. But then I do feel like there's probably this fairly small area of people that are well-intentioned and perhaps do feel that if they read a script at a client that they are helping in some way. And, I think there might be the odd unintentional scammer out there that they're not trying to be mean or malicious or exploitative, but that lack of confidence in, putting the paper down and actually reading not the script but the client in front of them probably isn't doing the industry itself any favors, because I think there's too many people like that think hypnosis is reading words at people rather than actually, what I would consider real hypnosis, if that makes any sense, Deborah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think maybe that's as well where a lot of hypnotherapy is coming across as it doesn't work, is because there may be so many people out there just sitting with scripts. And I personally don't know what the success rate is of somebody that just sits with scripts over and over and over again. I couldn't, it's not how I could work. I studied anxiety. I wanted to work with anxiety clients. That was my passion. I studied anxiety for like 20 years before I actually even began my road in ANLP and hypnotherapy, and I packaged that together. So I couldn't imagine sitting with an anxiety client and reading a script. I just don't know how that would work.
It's interesting. But then again, if the rapport is really well, really, really well established, if the person has an expectation of change, if they're already at the point of threshold and their perception is, well, having words, they might not know that these words are a script. They might feel that they're really customized to them, and then change can still take place. And so long as that hypnotist gets the occasional win where a client comes back and says, wow, this was so good, this was so amazing, that's going to keep them doing what they're doing, and not necessarily doing what I think some people would consider real hypnosis. But again, that's just a value statement. That's just a belief from my perspective. I'm sure if we have any people reading scripts, and come up on stage, I'd love to play devil's advocate and hear your point as well. Desiree, welcome up on the stage.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, when you're talking about, the scripts, and I'm not anti-script. I mean, I'm so grateful that I've gotten to a point where I don't have to rely on them. But my first training, when I look back at that, it's disturbing to think that some of the people in that training are still using that technique and haven't, gone on. I know that some of them haven't gone on to keep learning and finding new people. I was in New York City when I first trained, and I chose the school that I trained with because it was the only state accredited school, and I thought that meant something, but it didn't. And it was, one of the bigger hypnosis, teaching, training places, guilds or whatever. And it was disturbingly limited, and these scripts seemed like they were like 30 years old. And, there was no mention really of calibrating and now when I look back at that, that was only like 5 years ago for me, and it's a little disturbing. So you just hope that people who are passionate about this, look for, other teachers and keep trying to evolve. As hypnotists, I actually just became certified as a hypnosis trainer because of that, because I'm so passionate. And, there was not a mention of actually that what's going on in our brains at the time. And I know that's still a constantly like a new developing science. But that says so much about what we can do with hypnosis. And I'm really passionate about that. So I'm looking forward to training people, as they can start on their journey with some real science. And also, I'm into energy work and all of that too. And I think it goes hand in hand. So yeah, but the formulas they gave us, it's like, this is what you do with someone with anxiety. It's 3 sessions. This is the first session. This is the second. This is the third. Smoking was 5 sessions. Weight loss was this. And we're not, really equipped to deal with the trauma at all or what was underlying that. So yeah, it can be, I don't know, when I think of the things that I've learned along the way that I've discovered just by working with people, that I wasn't prepared for by that first training. I'm very thankful that I was, I'm on a quest, and I think most of us stay on that quest and we keep learning. That's all I had to contribute for now. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really, really appreciate that. Rowan, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that resonates quite a lot with me, because my first training was similar to that. It gave us a sort of a layout of how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with smoking, so on and so forth. But one of the things that I think is possibly one of the problems with using scripts is the fact that Milton Erickson wrote scripts for his clients. And he did it specifically because he was trying to find a way around the fact that hypnosis was not allowed in a therapeutic environment. It was only seen to be allowed on stage at that point. So he had to work out a way of modifying hypnosis to be able to use in a standard conversation. So he worked out how to do his multiple embedded metaphors. So in that respect, he would write out pages and pages of possible suggestions and then refine them into a series of stories that he could tell to his client. And in that respect, he would, I believe, actually tell him, I'm going to read from this because I want to make sure I get everything just right for you. So he wrote scripts for his own clients, but they were always custom built for those particular clients. And when I found that out, when I first started doing this, I started doing that. I started writing scripts for my clients, and I would write custom things. And there is a really good book, the Neil Erickson Approach to Persuasive Healing, and it's called Hypnotherapy Scripts. But in that, it teaches you how to write multiple embedded metaphors in a really clean way. So I think that aspect of the fact that he is one of the sort of forefathers of modern hypnosis in a non-direct hypnotic way, in this sort of the Ericksonian style, that's sort of led us into this problem where we have these books and books and books of hypnotic metaphors, really. And we see them as scripts, and we're taught them as scripts, but they're not really. They're stories, they're metaphors to be used in conversation rather than in actual induced hypnotic states. So it seems to have sort of muddied the waters in that respect, I think, as far as using scripts goes. And it's led to this space where people think that it's okay to just read a script instead of actually writing stories for their clients.
Mm. And that's my issue with the script, is that the script has existed before the client came along and will exist after the client has gone. So therefore, how can you calibrate a script to the client if you don't know about the client at that point? And this element of almost looking at scripts as recipes, and thinking, well, if I read that script, it will get that result. For me, that feels a bit like a scam. If someone said, right, I'm going to pay £200 or $300 for an hour session, and actually what's happening is that I sit in a chair, I get this standard pre-talk, I close my eyes, and either on a mobile phone or a piece of paper, they're reading something at me that doesn't relate to my experience and anything individual to me. I would label that as a scam, personally. That feels like a scam to me.
Agreed, definitely.
Yeah. Steve, welcome up on the stage. Good to have you here again. What's your thoughts?
Hi there. I just wanted to pick up on the point made earlier about threshold, because I think that's particularly valid. I've done the numbers on my own clients, and well over 70% of my clients have already been through mainstream counselling, psychotherapy before they get to me. So I think we are very often sort of end of the road for a lot of people. They've tried everything else and nothing's worked. And, if this guy or this woman can't fix me, then nobody can. And that can very often work in our favour. That can very often tip them into being into a position of threshold. But I think a large part of what we do in a therapeutic sense, and probably on stage as well, I don't do stage work incidentally, is prestige. It's having that authority, having that presence, having that confidence, that sort of massive, unstoppable confidence. And it doesn't have to be in a loud or brash way. It can be in a very, very quiet way. We can all do it in our own style. It's about giving people phenomenon. And I think it's about giving the client responsibility for their own change. If they don't play along with this, they're not going to get a benefit out of it. But the one thing which I do see is as a parallel to the con people out there, if you like, is the fact that we are instilling this confidence in our clients. Now that's what a con man would do. Now obviously they haven't got the goods to deliver, but we do. But we are working in a similar way. We're giving that confidence through our prestige. And I think that's quite an interesting comparison to make there.
I agree. It is. And there is a slight overlap, because if we can accept the placebo effect and the law of expectancy definitely influences the efficacy of hypnosis, then the attributes of a good hypnotist do overlap with the attributes of a good con man, let's be honest, because it's giving that sense of certainty when they don't have it for themselves. And when you see titles of books from Paul McKenna, saying, I will make you thin, I will make you rich, that's the same language as a con man, because effectively at that point, the locus of control is not within the individual. They don't feel that they can be thin. They don't feel that they can be rich. So having that confidence of saying, no, I will do this for you. I will make you this person, certainly is the language of a con man. But as long as it happens to enough people, because for me, the antidote of the question of is hypnosis a scam comes down to one word: proof. And it's proof or evidence for the person experiencing the hypnosis, which is why I think convincers and phenomenon is such an important element of the hypnotic experience. Because if they've experienced things that they don't normally experience, if they have experienced time distortion, if they have experienced an element of, whether it's catalepsy or certain phenomenon that they don't normally experience, they're going to interpret that as evidence. They're going to evaluate their own experience and say, I was hypnotized because, and I think it's Robert Cialdini that talked about the power of the word because in influence. People are reasonable if you have reasons. And I think if people feel that they can say, well, I was hypnotized because, and they can actually say something, they're going to feel like they were hypnotized, in which case we meet their expectations. And more importantly, we're going to generate referrals. And I think to the outsiders, for me, proof is social proof. It's testimonials, it's videos, it's screenshots of clients saying, you've changed my life. And for me, I don't do it in every case, but a lot of the time, if I get an interesting message or a client that says an email, yes, I'll cross out their names and that kind of stuff, but I want to share that because there are a lot of people out there that don't believe that hypnosis works. And I think it's a responsibility of all of us as hypnotists to share these success stories. Get your client to say it on video, ask them to just summarize on a quick text message or something like that, how it changed them in some way. And then we share that with a wider audience, because there is enough bad news and kind of fear mongering out there with hypnosis. Let's share some social proof of the results actually happening as a result of what we've done with clients. And then we might be able to influence the perception of those people on the other side of the fence that think, nah, it's a scam, it's fake, and of course, if they really have that belief, they'll think that the testimonial is fake. They'll think that the social proof is doctored or kind of a stooge or whatever it might be. But I think that's why I'm such a big fan of video testimonials, because there is an element of authenticity that you get. I think I can spot a fake video testimonial, and I get a sense of when it's real. Written testimonials, for me, yeah, they're okay, and particularly if they're like text messages and they use the language that they would normally use. But video testimonials, I think, can help change the perception as to whether or not hypnosis is a scam on a wider scale. Rowan, what's your thoughts there in terms of how collectively we can start changing perceptions on this idea of, is hypnosis a scam?
I think I've got written on my notebook in front of me, stand up and be counted. And I think that's a good thing for this, if we can share as much as possible. The more hypnotists that are good that can share those sort of testimonials, videos, even like actual medical papers and scientific papers on this, and share information about people who have done this sort of research, like Rossi and Cheek and these sort of guys. I think working with clients, any sort of ideodynamic responses that you can create within them, as long as you explain that properly to the client and let them realize that this is, our language effectively affecting your body in some way, whether that's an ideodynamic, idiomotive, idiosensory response, that shows them that these sort of things are genuine and real. So stand up and be counted and share everything you can that's allows us to put into media, because that's effectively what it is. It's social media and mainstream media as well, was what you do. The more we can put the right message out there, the more we can start to counteract the negative message that's been going out for so long. And I think it looks to me, looking back over the history of hypnosis, that there's been a sort of stamping on hypnosis whenever it starts to gain traction as something that's actually worthwhile and usable. And I know we were talking earlier about Mesmer and the French. They did a sort of expose, I suppose, a test on Delis, one of his students, and suggested that one of the trees had been magnetized when it was actually a different tree, and the boy had fallen into trance when he touched the wrong tree. So they basically claimed that magnetism wasn't real, and effectively outlawed it across Europe, when actually all they really did was show that it was suggestion and not magnetism that was actually at play here. But it didn't take away from the fact that it was actually helping people, it was actually changing lives. And all of the people that were working with it and knew that it worked carried on working with it in their basements, in their attics, until Braid came along and called it hypnosis or monoideism. And at that point it started to come back out again. And we've seen this time and again throughout history with Erickson and people like that, where as soon as it starts to gain traction, or even Dave Ellman, he only taught medical professionals. And when I first moved to Edinburgh, like 10, 15 years ago, the doctor that I went to was a hypnotist. But now if you speak to the doctors and nurses, they don't even get taught about suggestion in the universities in Edinburgh. So I think there's a real shift needs to happen where the guys that actually know that this is something real and this is something that's an effective way of creating really fast and profound shifts within people's health and well-being. It's our responsibility to stand up and be counted in this respect.
Powerful words there, powerful words. So the question I alluded to, and anyone up on stage, feel free to kind of contribute to this. I think hypnosis, isn't helped by the fact that there is no verifiable way of proving competency. And if you were to look at other things like professional sports, like boxing or football, soccer, whatever you want to call it, you get to see how competent people are, publicly, because they regularly compete. We've got the Olympics taking place on now. Someone could call themselves a fantastic long jumper. We're going to find out the moment that they start running towards that sandpit. I watch UFC and mixed martial arts. Anyone could pretend to be a fantastic fighter, but we're going to find out in seconds the moment that you're in that octagon. And I think that not that there needs to be, but it would be useful if there was some way of really and truly evaluating the competency of hypnotists. And I have no confidence in training academies as the way to do that. I've shared this story before, but when I did my foundation course in hypnosis, the person I was partnered with couldn't even string a sentence together, and she passed that foundation course. So we can't rely on the training institutions that have a vested interest in passing people so they can sell them the next course up. I think it needs to be something verifiable, because in many other professions, you can test, you can see competency by peers and by observers. Hypnosis typically takes place in a room where it's just you and the client. There is no way of verifying the competency of that hypnotist. And I think that's why potentially it rewards people that aren't necessarily competent hypnotists, but are just good at getting clients and, having people believe that they've experienced something, even if they haven't. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on this. I guess my key question is, how could we pick out a fraud? How could we pick out a con man that isn't particularly good at hypnosis, but is pretending to be? I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
I've given this a lot of thoughts, actually. And the point I would make is, well, let's have a look at doctors, for example. There's a General Medical Council here in the UK. There's other institutions around the world. And yet how many times do we see doctors struck off for malpractice and this sort of thing? I'm not saying they're all bad, obviously, but that's a system like that does not guarantee either excellence or necessarily competence. You can have people who can prove they've passed an exam. You can have people who demonstrated their diagnostic skills if they're a doctor, or their hypnotic skills if they're a hypnotist, in front of another professional who then says this person is fit to practice. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be doing a good job out there. A good friend of mine is a psychotherapist. Now, she's got a degree, and a good degree, in psychotherapy. And she started telling me about a course she'd been on about this amazing new technique called Rewind that she'd been on. And all she does is just read scripts at people. Now, this is somebody who is highly qualified, who has got a degree. And I started talking to her about it. And I ended up putting a little informal group together with her and about three of her sort of colleagues. And I went along, we just met up in a pub. And I showed them Freddie Jacquin's approach to the fast phobia cure. I showed them Mike Mandel's. I showed them the Human Givens approach to it. But they were still just intent upon reading scripts to people. And these are people who have been through the sort of system you're talking about there. So I don't actually think that's the answer. I think we've got to do this one client at a time. I take the point about social proof. The point I would make to counter that is the way our culture is going. People don't believe what they see on YouTube anymore, especially after the events of the last year or so. There's been so much conspiracy theory and this sort of thing. I think people are holding a lot less faith in what they see now. In fact, very often they just automatically challenge it. So I think we've got to be doing this one client at a time.
Because I guess what's even more powerful than testimonial is word of mouth. When one person recommends a hypnotist because of their own personal experience, that has way more credibility than you seeing a testimonial or something like that. What's your thoughts, Justin? I saw you took your mic off there.
Yeah, as a stage hypnotist, we are taught that word of mouth is really the most important thing, because if I say to you that I'm an hypnotist, you can believe it, but if your friends, if your loved ones tells you that I'm an hypnotist, that works even better. So usually when I'm at parties, the fact that I'm an hypnotist is something that comes up because there aren't a lot of street hypnotists in Italy. So it's a bit weird. So, at parties, social gatherings, now there aren't that many parties or social gatherings, but in general, I always got introduced as the hypnotist. And that really helped with people wanting to try things, because if someone you trust tells you about hypnosis, it gets you more at ease if I tell you that I'm an hypnotist. Because as everyone said, as Steve said, that was really interesting, it's really hard to analyze the ability of someone as an hypnotist. I post some photos on my Instagram, and sometimes I watch them and I say, yeah, I could have just staged those. Because in photos, when you do like poses and weird things under hypnosis, photos don't really get you the idea of hypnosis. They kind of sort of work, but there's no difference between a fake hypnosis photo and a real hypnosis photo. I think that word of mouth is still the most powerful thing, because as Steve said, not everybody is trusting everyone right now. So if someone tells you that they trust you and that they trust your work, it usually works better than if you pull yourself, if you get yourself out. it's really weird. And again, about the analyzing the ability of the hypnotist, it's super hard because even as a normal therapist, not an hypnotherapist, it's hard to see the depth of one's ability. And my mom is a psychologist. I work with autistic kids in my day job, and I work with a lot of therapists during my years, and I've seen great people, amazing people, and not so good people. But again, that's just my opinion. I have a master's degree in education, so I don't have a real sense of what works and what doesn't. And as you said, maybe we can work with experts, but if we can't see who the experts are, how can we decide the council, let's just say, of people that are going to evaluate what you're trying to do? It's really difficult. Also, last thing, I think that it's not only the ability of the hypnotist, but it's also the ability to create rapport. So if I'm a good hypnotist, but I don't create a good rapport with my subject, it still doesn't work. I think that's really important. We were talking about scripts, about reading from scripts. As a stage hypnotist, I usually try to learn more and more techniques because not every technique works with everyone. And so you have to read on the fly what is going to work, what is not going to work. And I think it's kind of it's not the same because hypnotherapy is a whole different level. But the idea behind it is to tailor your things, tailor your inductions on the subject. And that is what is going to work because, again, I may be the greatest stage hypnotist, the greatest Italian stage hypnotist. There's like 3 of us, so it's not a big competition. I may be the greatest Italian stage hypnotist, but if I don't create a good rapport with my subject, if I don't tailor my induction on them in the right way, in the way that it feels good to them, it still won't work, I think. So it's not just a matter of technique. It's not just a matter of knowledge. We talked about books and like getting our hands dirty. It's just a matter of there are a lot of different factors, like the human factor, which is the strongest one. Again, my English not the best, but I can get the point across. Thank you.
You certainly can get your point across there, Justin. It completely made sense to me. And I would say that, because these things that are less measurable, like rapport, are so important, I don't think you can be a great hypnotist unless you can build rapport quickly and effectively and know when you've lost it as well and get it back rapidly. And yes, you can learn these techniques like, pacing, leading, matching, mirroring, and all these kind of things. But fundamentally, it's a skill that's relatively hard to measure. Rowan, we've got the Olympics on right now. If there was hypnosis as an Olympic sport, how would the judges decide who gets the gold medal?
That's a really difficult question. Do we gauge it on the ability to produce phenomena, or do we gauge it on the ability to produce positive shifts, positive change within the individual? I don't know how you would possibly do a Hypno Olympics, and that did pop into my mind when you were saying this earlier. I think that something that is always going to be there for us is the referrals. And it made me think, when Steve was talking there, the idea of trustatrade.com or something like that, catering for hypnosis as well, might be something that would be a benefit to our industry as a whole. But as far as a sort of, if it was an Olympic sport, it would have to be down to sort of, the hypnotic phenomena and convincers in that respect, I think, because everything else is subjective. Nothing else can be seen by other people. And I think you would have to have the cooperators wired up to some form of new feedback device so you could actually see, so fMRI or something like that, so you could actually see the shifts that are going on in the brain. And I know there's been studies done with this, with people visualizing and seeing colors under hypnosis, and people that are just good at visualizing colors and seeing shifts in different areas of their brain lighting up under fMRI. So there is actually scientific proof that there is a verifiable shift in people that are in a hypnotic state over people that are just good at visualizing. So I think that would be the only thing that I can sort of think that comes to mind as a real verifiable way of showing this.
Sold. We're gonna pitch the idea to the International Olympic Committee, and within the next 50 years, hypnosis will be an Olympic sport, and I'm sure you'll be on the podium, Rowan. I'm convinced of it. We're coming to the end. This hour has flown by. Thank you to everyone that's joined us up on stage talking about this fairly controversial topic. Is it a scam? And I think, unfortunately, there is a sizable proportion of the population out there that don't trust that hypnosis is real. They think it's fake. They think it is a scam. And unfortunately, I think there are a relatively small percentage of people that call themselves hypnotists or hypnotherapists that probably are scammers, don't really know what they're doing, happy to take the money, don't really care if they get the result. So hypnosis, is it a scam? Well, I would say true hypnosis isn't a scam because it's done well. And true hypnosis is about, eliciting a need or an issue from a client, calibrating them, and then constantly, refining what you communicate and how you communicate to create some kind of positive change. So hypnosis, if it's done well, can't be a scam. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people out there that don't do it properly and don't care if they do it properly and are still happy to take the money, which I would label a scam. Any summary from you there, Rowan?
I think you've covered it quite well there. I think the only thing that I would sort of add to that is that our best weapon in this fight that we have against this idea of hypnosis being a scam is the referrals from people. So get your clients to refer, get your clients to talk about what's happened. But I think, something that came up before in a conversation that I was having, or possibly on one of our clubhouse things, was this idea that, don't get your clients to tell people that they've had hypnosis. If they've stopped smoking with you or something like that, wait for their friends to ask them, wait a second, you've had a shift, what's going on there? And then tell them you've been to see a hypnotist. And I think that way it comes out naturally and organically and can almost have more power and more impact on them, that you've not been going out saying, well, I got hypnotized to stop smoking. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I feel like then the convincer is in the real experience and change within the individual, which, builds credibility from that, actual real life experience and the change, the transformation that people have witnessed. Thank you everyone for joining us up on stage. Thank you everyone in the audience for listening to this talk today. If you are interested, if you click the little house above the title at the top of the screen, you can follow Hypnosis Rooms. You'll automatically be notified of any future topics and scheduled conversations that we have. If you want to follow any of us up on stage, click our profile, click follow. And if you want to learn more about us, click on the Instagram link, and then you can follow us on there and have more of a conversation. Equally, if you've got any ideas for future topics, again, probably easiest way is either follow myself or Rowan, send us a direct message on Instagram, and perhaps next week or the week after, we could be talking about a topic that you'd quite like to talk about. So thank you everyone for joining us again on Hypnosis Rooms, and hopefully see you next week, next Thursday at 9 p.m. UK time.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.